Very good morning to you, Azar. And before we get into the economic data we can anticipate this week, I just want to touch on an article that I read yesterday about the fact that this 350 Rand grant has now been extended to March next year. And the article quoted another analyst who said that this may prompt the finance minister to increase VAT by a further 1% in the upcoming budget speech, because where else is he going to be getting the extra funding for another year? Your thoughts on where he'll be scrambling for the funds?
He actually doesn't need to scramble for the funds right now, necessarily. The fact is that the government has been getting a lot more revenue from company tax than it had expected. In fact, over 100 billion Rand more than it needs, mainly as a result of the rise in precious metals and other commodity prices that have boosted the profits of mining companies and therefore has increased the tax that they pay. The big issue is that how reliably can the government actually bank on those extra government revenues continuing? So yes, it's actually got the money that it can justify just dishing out the extra amount for the special social grant, or it can take the much more cautious and I suppose rigorous approach and say, no, we don't believe that we can rely on these additional funds to continue into the future, and therefore we have to increase tax. Now, a rise in the rate of VAT of 1% could bring in an extra 25 billion Rand, which would go about halfway towards funding this extra money for social grants. But if you really wanted to cover the full amount of social grants, you would need to raise the rate of VAT by 2%, or alternatively increase corporate personal tax rates significantly. And either way, that could be detrimental for real economic activity. So I'm not convinced that the government is necessarily going to actually budget to increase taxes more than, or any more than it is than it's done at the moment.
Very interesting insights there, and you're absolutely correct when you say it could be detrimental, because my thought as you were talking, Azar, is that even if they did increase it by the 1%, this form of revenue collection in that we increase VAT or personal income tax constantly is not a sustainable move for the government when it comes to consumers participating in the economy, because it just further strains them.
Without a doubt, it strains them. And the other thing to bear in mind is, why did the government specify that the special grant would only be in place for another year? In a sense, it's hinting at the fact that, yes, right now we've got enough money to pay for it, but we can't guarantee that we will have enough money to pay for it going further in the longer term. And we are scared that increasing taxes right now to pay for such grants is going to be counterproductive, and will actually hamper job creation in the longer term rather than enhance it. And we can't keep dishing out cash to people who haven't got jobs. The far better way to do it is to dish out cash to companies to try and encourage them to create jobs through various incentives.
No, absolutely. Let's get into the economic data that's going to be coming out this week, Azar. We've got consumer price inflation, and inflation in general. We've seen some significant moves over the last a few periods. Your anticipation in terms of what's set to come out, given the volatility of the local unit, given the price of commodities at the moment?
This is the good news area of what the data releases are. We got a huge fright last week from the United States, which saw inflation going up to 7.5%, the highest level in 40 years. In South Africa, of course, we got the fright in December when our inflation rate went to 5.9%, which was the highest in 5 years. But there is a very good chance that this inflation rate will drop back quite sharply to around 5.5% this coming week, on account of statistical factors, and that is related to the fact that in January 2021, fuel prices soared quite sharply. So we will be comparing the 2022 January fuel prices against a much higher base of fuel prices in January 2021 than was the case with the comparison that we made in December. And that alone could account for quite a sharp fall-off in our inflation rate and diffuse some of the pressures that have been building up on the Reserve Bank to increase interest rates a lot more over the coming year.
Yeah. Azar, we have run out of time, but I'm going to squeeze this in, and if you could just be brief with your response. Retail sales also set to come out this week, and they are also quite a good indicator or a solid indicator of the confidence that the consumer has on the economy.
Yes, there have been some favorable signs recently that consumers are in better shape than we would like to think them, or rather the consumers who are capable of spending are in better shape, and they've benefited from low interest rates over a long period of time and not going to restaurants, not going on holiday, and so they've been able to save and have a little spare cash to spend on retail now.
Yeah, absolutely. Azar Jammine, Chief Economist at Econometrix, joining us this morning.